This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
And welcome to the program. Last week, a legislative health reform task force voted 10-2 with 4 abstentions to advance the governor's version of Medicaid expansion. No longer the private option. It's going to be reestablished as Arkansas Works. Also, the governor presenting his $5.33 billion state budget, which includes increases for DHS and public education. Joining me to talk politics and policy is Senate President Jonathan Dismang and Speaker of the House Jeremy Gillam. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Thanks. You guys finally had a busy week. Y'all been laid off for like forever. Finally, there's some action going on up at the Capitol here. Let's talk about the Arkansas Works plan. It needs 50% plus 1 to pass in terms of policy in a special session that's going to happen a week before the fiscal session. Yeah. What happens next? Are you guys going to put legislation together? You guys going to co-sponsor that legislation?
I'm not sure who we're going to have as sponsors. We haven't gotten that far with it. We're still waiting on the language from the governor. We'll present that to the members, let them make their decision about where they'd like to be and if they'd like to provide any changes or alterations to that language. But I don't think we're quite to the sponsorship portion of that yet. And we also, again, are still waiting to have that legislation to look at.
Do you guys want to own it, though? I mean, do you want to be the sponsors on it?
Well, I think there are members of both chambers that have put a lot of hard work into this, and so, I mean, obviously, the members of the task force that have worked on this for quite a long time, they're going to get first options at being able to be a part of lead sponsors and co-sponsors, and we'll kind of go from there.
What do you think will want to be changed from what's been talked about? Kind of, we know the big picture sides of all of this. What do you think specifically some members are sharing or want to do that maybe tweak it a little bit from what they know of, preferences maybe?
Inside the actual Arkansas Works legislation or 2B legislation, the governor's been very open about what he's looking for and wanted to do, and so there's not going to be any mystery to the legislators what's going to go into that legislation. I haven't heard about any significant changes. I know that we're talking about at this point inside that work component or that work referral component, making sure that we also include some of our other entitlement programs here in the state.
Speaker?
Along the same lines, we're hearing about the same thing from the House members, and so I think there'll be some minor alterations that'll be offered up, but I haven't heard anything of major substance at this point.
So we're going to talk hoops a little bit later on, but I mean, do you kind of see this as a layup in the special session? I mean, do you think that there's a majority of support for the Arkansas Works program?
I never consider anything a layup with the General Assembly and especially the House. I mean, we'll go through the process and we'll give everybody the chance to have their voices heard through the committee process and then on the floor as well. I think just based on what we're hearing, you know, the odds are that you know, there's a pretty good amount of support there for the framework. What level that is yet, we don't know. A lot of this is still fluid, so there's nothing really concrete for us to nail down just yet.
Of course, really the big trick is the policy part of it may move pretty quickly because there probably is some consensus for sure over 50%. I'll go ahead and say it since you're a little reluctant to say it there. But then you got to get to the fiscal session, you got to pay for it, so which requires the 3/4 vote, although you guys are experimenting or at least exploring the possibility of doing it a different way. Am I reading that right?
I don't think that exploration is taking place in the Senate. I think that's more and more on the executive level, and I think they have every right to look at all the tools that they have in front of them. You know, at this point, the way that I've operated in the past and will continue to operate, we understand it to be a 75% threshold, and that's the position that we're going to operate from.
Yeah. What about on the House side?
Same thing. We've not really looked at anything other than the traditional 75 vote threshold for the House.
The Health Reform Task Force could not find consensus on managed care and maybe some different parts of the Medicaid program that could be farmed out for managed care. So they kind of left it as an open-ended kind of conversation, I guess it's fair to say. What's your sense of what will happen come legislative time on managed care?
I think we'll probably have a fair amount of consensus by the time we actually get to the special session to cover. I think there's enough individuals that have been working on this and looking at this for a great length of time. They're very talented and very creative, and I think with the governor and his staff, I think they're going to be able to put together a plan for us to really kind of get behind. At least that's my hope, and from what I'm hearing, it seems to me maybe that's kind of the direction we're heading, so I'm optimistic.
Like there will be some House and some Senate members, though, that are not going to be in favor of this and are going to raise a lot of cane about this. I mean, do you persuade them to your side, or do you just fight it out, let the votes fall where they may?
No, and I think it's we've got to talk about what we're really considering at this point. And, you know, you're at the very beginning of the process when, for instance, on the referral or the vote by the task force. Secondary to that is the creation of legislation. But really, I mean, where all the substance of building a managed care system in the state of Arkansas is going to be in the RFP and that process established by DHS. I think Director Gillespie is taking a look at that right now and is going to be very good at making the members comfortable about how we do progress.
One of, you've segued perfectly into one of my questions I have you guys. DHS new director, Cindy Gillespie, what's been your experience with her? I know she hadn't been on the job for very long, but what's your experience with her?
So far, my interactions have been fantastic. I think she is an extremely, bright, intelligent person. I think she's bringing a lot of fresh energy to the department, and I think it was a great hire from everything that I've seen so far. I think we're going to be very, very well served having her at the helm of DHS.
You share that sentiment?
I do, and I've had a really good positive response from the members, and that's on both sides of the aisle, and I think that speaks well to how she's carried herself so far here in the state. And again, I had a good conversation with her earlier this week or last week, and again, I think she's going to do a great job, be very thorough, and I think that's what we need.
So the governor's throwing a budget out there. Senator Bart Hester, I know Jonathan works to have him on a leash at all times. He proposed funding cuts to AETN, selling War Memorial Stadium, says higher education spending is out of control. Is there any part of what he is talking about that you guys feel is something that the legislature should consider?
Well, I think we always hear, from various parts of the state, depending on what higher ed institution they have in their area, comments that, maybe they need to watch their spending a little bit. From what I've heard, for the most part, from the House members, the AETN components and things like that he's recommended don't have much traction on our end of the building. So we'll let the process work itself out over the next few weeks, and we'll see where we're at when we actually start the fiscal session.
So to both of you, is higher education spending out of control, as Senator Hester says?
I think that we need to look at higher education spending. I'm not sure as a total that we're out of control for the dollars that we're spending. I think we need to look at the allocations that we have for each university or each system. That's something that hasn't really been revisited in probably a decade, and I think it's probably time to do that.
Higher education will tell you they need more, so it's not out of control. They're underfunded is what they'll say.
Well, and I think along those lines, I think we've got to make sure that everything is being aligned with the workforce initiatives and making sure the funding's flowing where it needs to flow. I think in the totality, I concur with President Dismang that probably, a total review is not out of the realm, but coming in and just blanket cuts just for that sake of cutting is probably not the prudent action at this point.
You do think that the Joint Budget Committee will take a look at higher education spending with maybe a finer tooth comb than they have in the past?
I mean, again, to some degree, I think it would require us to take a look at the actual funding allocations to each system or university or whatever it may be, and I'm not sure that we'll have the time to be able to do that, but I think it's a very good discussion for us to start having as we get ready for the actual regular session.
There are some proposals that everybody's floating. You guys may even have a few of your own, different from what the governor proposed. What do you think is the biggest thing that we might see a change to what was proposed by the governor?
Well, I think from the House side, I mean, obviously, we've got a lot of members that are very interested in the Child and Family Services funding and foster care system. So our folks are going to be looking at that.
Which he proposed more.
He did, and I've heard good things from the membership so far on that. I think at the end of the day, I think most of our folks seem to be fairly pleased with the general outlay of the presentation, but they've really not been able to dive into it just yet. So I think as the weeks go on and we get closer to the fiscal session, there may be some more concrete suggestions come to the fore.
Will there be a contingency if Arkansas Works doesn't get funded?
I mean, I think that's a very difficult situation. The members that are opposed to Arkansas Works, they're going to find themselves in regards to the appropriation. Again, that's not a good discussion that I want to have right now. I want us to get through the policy. I'm sure, but I would like for us to get through the policy discussion, get through the special session, then we can have a discussion about whether or not it's appropriate to utilize appropriations to dictate policy.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. You guys are going to stick around. We're going to talk about hoops for kids here in just a second. I'm with Speaker of the House Jeremy Gillam and Senate President Jonathan Dismang. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about that charity basketball game coming up.